Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2.
Agriculture and Procurement Reform calls this public hearing to order. It is 2 p.m. on Tuesday, May 30th, 2017. Present with me today is to my right Vice Speaker Therese Terlahi, and on my left is Senator Tommy Morrison. The purpose of this public hearing is to receive testimony on bills number 26-34, relative to extending the timelines and means of notification for the landless purchasers. Bill number 49-34, relative to procurement policies governing small purchases, and bill number 75-34, relative to decisions by the Territorial Land Use Commission. Notice of this afternoon's public hearing was provided to senators, stakeholders, and the local media, as well as published in the Guam Daily Post on May 22nd, 2017, meeting the 5-day notice, and May 25th, 2017, meeting the 48-hour notice, thus meeting the requirements of the Open Government Law. The committee will continue to receive written testimony until 5 p.m. on Tuesday, June 6th. Please address testimonies to Senator Tom Atta, Chairperson, Committee on Environment, Land, Agriculture, and Procurement Reform. And it can be dropped to the mailboxes here at the Legislature or email to office@senatoratta.org. We'll start in numerical order then. The first bill to be heard is Bill number 26-34. Bill number 26-34, and I'll ask the Vice Speaker is sitting in for the sponsor, and she'll introduce the bill. Present also with us is Senator Jimmy Espaldon and Senator Regine Bisco-Lee. So, Vice Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Apparently, Senator Nelson called and informed me that she's very sick today, so asked me to read her letter of introduction of the bill, if I may, and it's dated May 30 to the Honorable Thomas C. Atta, Chairperson, Committee on Environment, Lands, Agriculture, and Procurement Reform. Dear Chairperson Atta, Hafaday, thank you for scheduling Bill number 26-34 as corrected by the sponsor for public hearing. The Land for the Landless program was a series of laws to distribute government lots to low-income families between 1978 and 1987. The 33rd Guam Legislature passed 2 bills imposing deadlines on Department of Land Management processing of applications in default, and to move the properties into the Chamorro Land Trust inventory. The law required procedures and deadlines that may have been too restrictive for land agents and applicants to address the range of historic issues and satisfy government guidelines. If enacted, Bill number 26 will allow a wider variety of procedures for public officers to find and notify qualified Land for the Landless program applicants. It will allow qualified applicants to make payment arrangements and allow land officers to assist unsuccessful applicants to transition to other housing and land programs. Foreclosed and vacated lots will be transferred into the Chamorro Land Trust Commission inventory. In March, as author of the bill, I sought the public's input on Bill number 26-34 COR in the villages of Dedido and Inarajan during town hall meetings, where the highest numbers of applicant cases have yet to be resolved. The town hall meeting in Inarajan was well attended, and the applicants and their families were able to seek clarification and updates from the Department of Land Management. Director, Mr. Michael J. Bora, who was present for questions and answers on specific inquiries from those who would be affected by the bill. I would like to thank the following mayors for their participation in the town hall meetings and assisting in notifying the applicants and their families on the bill and town hall meetings. Dedido Mayor Melissa Savares, Inarajan Mayor Doris Lujan, Marito Mayor Ernest Chargaloff, and Talafofo Mayor Vicente Taitabu.
like to thank the following mayors, Mayor Melissa Tavares, Mayor Doris Lujan, Inarajan, Mauricio Mayor Ernest Chargala, and Talafofo Mayor Vicente Taitigui. Additionally, I would like to thank Department of Land Management Director Mr. Michael Borja for participating in the town hall meeting and being available to answer questions from those present in regards to those specific cases. I look forward to the committee's discussions and approval of this legislation and request that this statement be included in the committee report of Bill 26-34. So we've only got one individual that has signed up, Margarita Borja. Will you be reading the? Okay, excellent. Step forward, please. So please identify yourself.
Good afternoon, Senators. My name is Margarita Borja. I'm a land administrator for land management. I'm here today on behalf of Mr. Michael Borja. I'll be reading his written testimony. It's a letter to Senator Thomas C. Atta, 34th Guam Legislature, Chairman Committee on Environment, Land, Agriculture.
Ms. Borja, can you adjust your mic?
With regard to Bill number 26-34, an act to amend Section 3 of Public Law 33-104 and Section 2 of Public Law 33-176, relative to extending the timelines and means of notification for land for the landless purchasers. Buenas and Hafade. Bill number 26-34 intends to further extend the timeline for land for the landless program purchasers with default accounts to complete their payment for the government land being sold to them. The Department of Land Management and its testimony for previous legislations which were later enacted in public laws supported such time extensions. However, we emphasize the need to bring this program to a final conclusion, especially since all purchasers were originally provided 10 years to make full payment of $2,500. But yet an additional decade had elapsed for these default accounts to be fully paid. Prior to the enactment of Public Law 33-104 in 2015, there were 396 Land for the Landless program accounts in default. On December 31st, 2016, the end of the extended timelines, there were 307 default accounts. Today, 240 accounts remain in default. We have a chart here. Would you want me to read that out?
Yes.
Okay. We have a chart, and we have it under subdivision, number of recipients, balance due, and fully paid. In FEMA, this is in Dedido, we have 167 recipients, 110 have fully paid, and 57 are still due. IHA in Inarajan, there were 304 recipients, 243 have paid in full, 61 balance due. Higua in Mauricio, 136, 79 have fully paid, 57 still due. Talafofo subdivision, 221, 178 fully paid, 43 remaining. Umatec, 99, 77 fully paid, 22 have a balance due. The total comes out to 927 recipients that were awarded. 687 have paid in full, with leaving 240 recipients still with balance due. Despite outreaches by certified mail, published listings in the local newspapers, and information hearings recently held in Dedido and Inarajan, many of the accounts remain dormant with no inquiries from the contracted purchasers. The department remains hopeful to settle each of these default accounts, especially those with inhabited homes. As the department has previously testified on default accounts with inhabited homes, it is our intention to seek measures necessary to avoid displacement of people from their homes. It will be necessary for this legislature to assist with legislation to provide alternative means to convey these properties, such as conversion to conditional long-term leasing. However, even most of these purchasers have made no attempt to contact the department despite notices being personally served to each resident by a certified process server. Since the introduction of this bill, the Department of Land Management has withheld the reporting of documents necessary to transfer the lands of defaulted accounts to the Chamorro Land Trust Commission as defined in Public Law 33-104. Instead, the department has continued to entertain efforts by contracted awardees to resolve their accounts until the final disposition of this bill. While the department respects the intent of the original laws creating the Land for the Landless program, closure of this program is necessary. Due to the lack of effort by the contracted awardees to pay their awarded lands within the 10-year time period as required by the original laws, these lands have been dormant and do not yield any property taxes. Although over 20 years have elapsed, these lands continue to be dormant. As a result, as recent public laws allowed, these lands should now be in the Chamorro Land Trust Commission land inventory for lease assignment to qualified applicants in that program. Since the properties are surveyed and ready for immediate leasing, they would yield revenue for the CLTC in the form of property taxes paid by the lessees. It is also quite probable that some of the dormant accounts are the result of a deceased awardee. The department is in the process of making this determination. In the event of an awardee being deceased, the account may still be brought current by the family. However, the conditional deed would be issued to the estate of the contracted awardee, and the final disposition of the property would have to be determined by the probate court. 15 GCA Chapter 14 and 21 GCA Chapter 29. If this is the case, the additional cost of the probate should have to be considered by the family. Nevertheless, this legislation intends to spend more CLTC funds, which is designated for the surveying and infrastructure development of CLTC properties, to instead reissue certified letters, republish lists, and continue to pound the pavement in the search of individuals who, by their inactions, have refused to fulfill the responsibility to pay for their awarded lands, which were extremely undervalued and with generous payment terms. The considerations provided by this government to this program included infrastructure development and surveying of all properties. These same considerations were not afforded to the CLTC program, and today it struggles just to get appropriations for surveying. Department of Land Management instituted a voluntary moratorium on transferring properties of defaulted Land for the Landless program accounts in February 2017. When this bill was initially introduced, despite having the lawful authority to transfer these properties to the CLTC, the Land for the Landless program is a legacy program and has far surpassed its original intentions, and where other originally proposed lands were transferred to the CLTC for its administration. Currently, the bulk efforts of land administration personnel by the Department of Land Management is the management of the CLTC residential and agricultural lease programs. To continue to curtail the curtain call for the Land for the Landless program means the diversion of the limited human resources currently available for a program that has surpassed its lifespan by over 10 years. The department has made all required and reasonable efforts to bring closure to the default Land for the Landless program accounts. On this point, we find it difficult to offer support for Bill number 26-34. Sinceramente, Michael J.B. Borja, Director.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bora. Mr. Aguilar, were you going to provide a testimony? Just here in support? Okay. Go ahead. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for the testimony. I did have a couple of questions about how many notices have been sent so far, how many appeals, but those are all detailed in your letter. Do you mind just going through that really quickly? I know it's on the first page, but if we can just reiterate for those who might be watching at home. So, for the total number for all of the subdivisions, there were 927 recipients, correct?
That's right.
240 of them still have a balance due,
That's right.
and 687 are fully paid.
Yes.
Okay. Do we know, what has been your experience maybe? How long does it take for the Department of Land Management to process one case on average? Let's say that they have paid, and I'm not talking about the time that it takes to try to contact individuals. I'm just, if everything, all the stars align and everything kind of works out in the way that we had envisioned it, how long does it take to process one case?
And as far as coming full payment. Okay, usually the turnaround after they make a payment is usually like about a week for us to process the deed.
So the current timeline, basically the testimony is saying that the current timeline has been more than sufficient in trying to accomplish the original mandate. What you're saying.
Yes.
And at this time, the Department of Land Management cannot offer support for this bill. You feel that all opportunities to contact the 240 families who still have balance remaining have been exhausted?
Well, basically, when we first started the mail-outs, I can say maybe about 300 went out, about 396 went out. I can say that maybe 30% of that got returned.
Right.
So in noticing that, we went ahead and we worked with the mayors to see how we can get a hold of these individuals. And at the same time, we went door to door. And we found that out of the 300, there were only about 59 of them, 60 of them, who were actually occupying the property. So the remainder of that were either off island, and then after that was discovered that we had a bunch of return mail, we went ahead and we published it in the newspaper. That's when we saw not an influx, but random individuals, awardees coming in to and basically what they were doing, they were just inquiring. A lot of them just inquired, and then when they found out, what the payoff amount was, they kind of like, we'll think about it. So the majority of them came back, and like he mentioned in his testimony, there are a couple who are deceased. We went ahead and we just got word from, we worked closely with public health, and they came back. Out of the 240, I believe there were 13 that are deceased out of the 240. So they did their part and provided us with numbers as to who were deceased out of the 240.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that number?
13
deceased.
out of 240 that are waiting on, who still have a balance due. But we did encounter some recipients whose families did come in and pay it off, just to kind of save the property. But they were advised that their next step, of course, would be a probate, because we were unable to process a deed of conveyance to the deceased. They had to get authorization from the court, so they had to open up a probate, had to appoint an administrator, and then that administrator would be given that opportunity to come in and sign on behalf of the deceased. So far, only one has done that. Only one family, and just today, she picked up her deed for the estate. So a lot of them paid off, but just to kind of, hold on to the land and then think about working on probate.
Right. So just kind of thinking about this issue in terms of the timeline and everything that it's taken to get to this point, there are people who are able to make that payment, but it just takes time, right? They don't have the access to the funds right away. This $2,500 is not,
Yeah, we're not looking at 25. I think the most that we've come up with was about 7,000. Majority of them are about 5,000.
That's because there was interest.
That's interest accrued, and that's only at the 4.5% that was authorized by law, because the original yearly interest is 6%. So it actually decreased with the authorization of this Public Law 33-104. So it actually helped out, But even at that,
it's difficult.
it's
So, thank you, Ms. Bowler. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. These lands, are they all have existing infrastructure, access, government easement access?
yes, within 100 feet, yes. Not paved roads, but there's access.
So you also have a separate spreadsheet that also maybe accounts for those who have been issued these lands that don't have infrastructure infrastructure or access within 100 feet? Do you have a separate?
We can probably provide that, yes.
So you said these are ready to be leased or to be released, or would you say for those that are in a situation where they were provided these lands, who clearly finding out that when they're ready to develop or go out and start their first home and finding that they're not near close to infrastructure, or it makes it more difficult. The cost to even do that is you can't even get the house off the ground. So would you say that these lands that are defaulted would be an option for these folks who would like to swap or trade for better access so they can start with their homes? I know of a few that have come before my office and share their situation with me, and I know the department has been trying to assist some of these folks. I am stunned to see some of the lands that they have. I know where they're exactly at, especially in the south, and I don't even know how they'll begin. I'm just looking at it. But if they're ready to go, I mean, they've been working hard to secure financing, and that's the challenge they're having. Would you say that these will be part of, if these lands were to come back and based on the default, be an option for these folks?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Saldana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Bora, thank you. You did mention that the department did put out notices, and then after that, you even took out an ad in the paper, and published it that way, and then you made even an extra effort by going to the properties. Were your people able to go to all the properties of those who were in default?
Yes.
And the question I have is, on those properties, do you know if there was indeed a house on those properties?
Yes, we found out that there were 59.
59 out of the
Out of-
240?
No, out of the 300.
Out of the 300. But, okay. Okay, there were 307 counts
370 total.
in total. But up to date now there's only 240, so some of them have been paid off. But out of those 300, you were saying there were about 59, you said? That had
59.
house- 59?
Yes. So with the 240, there are only now 31. So out of the 240 that are left to pay, 31 of those have houses on them.
I'm sorry,
31.
31 houses. Okay. And in terms of those that had houses on them, were there people occupying it, or were they abandoned houses?
They were occupied.
They were occupied. And did your department get to speak to any of them as to why they hadn't come in to make the payments after all these years?
A lot of them were family members of the deceased, or a lot of them just, they're advised, they fear, they don't want to come down because, I really don't know. That's the way I see it, though. It's a lot of them fear that they come down there, they're going to take the property away, the better that they don't get in contact,
If this program were to continue, I guess it seems to me that the same payment options would they still be in place? I mean, it seems to me that when this plan was first implemented, it was definitely a very generous plan, $2,500 for a lot and payable over 10 years. That comes out to about $250 a year, and over 12 months, basically $20 a month is what they would be paying. That seems like a very generous deal
Yes.
for anybody who's getting any land. Have you kind of explained that to those who never came in to make a payment?
A lot of them are aware of it because they've signed up on contracts. So they're aware that they actually had to pay $225 a year
Right.
for the next 10 years.
For
They
the
would put a $250 down payment,
Uh-huh.
and then the next 10 years they would pay $225 plus a little interest for
Right.
the next
that was under the Public Law 33104. So it's still continued on in the same, under the same plan with decreased interest rates.
Yes.
In essence.
Yes.
Right. So it's more, actually, it's more attractive just to get to the pay. Let me ask you this: you said out of the 240, now there out of the 240, there's 31 lots with homes on it.
Yes.
Would you be, or would the department be amenable to perhaps just continue the programs with the homes on it, and those that have no houses to maybe go back and do what the department is recommending and turn that back to the CLTC?
Yeah. If the law allows it, then we'll go ahead and do that.
Yeah, because if they haven't developed it after 20 years, I'm not sure going forward, and they haven't even made payment on it, then it seems like perhaps it was abandoned to a degree. But those with homes on it, and again, for whatever reason why they haven't made any payments, again, maybe we can help them understand, or the department can help them understand that this is actually a great deal if you just pay $20 a month or $25 a month, whatever it may be. Okay, and I just needed to ask that. So there are 31 lots of the balance deal, the remaining 240 that have structures on them, livable structures on them.
That's right.
And all the rest, 209 have none, had no structure on them.
That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hello. Thank you, Margarita. Well, may I ask that of the 31 homes then that are in default, if the bill does not pass, how will CLTC deal with that? How will you get this? How will you transfer those lands while there's somebody else's house on it?
Well, I think that's one of the things that needs to be addressed, because what we're finding out is, I'm not going to say that they're not Chamorros, but just basing myself on just the name of the individual that was awarded the property, I kind of, we kind of looked at it and said, what if? And there are some, because under the Land for the Landless program, you didn't have to be a Chamorro. You just needed to be a U.S. citizen, living within the vicinity, and be 18 years old. So now that if the property does revert back to the trust, again, it's one that they're not Chamorros, and they need to qualify, in as far as the date and time. Because Chamorro Land Trust, we go by date and time, and we're right now processing 1995 applications. If these individuals come in, they're going to be a 2017 applicant. How are we going to assist them? Is there going to be legislation to grandfather these people in, or will they qualify? Because another qualification is if they were there prior to in 1995, if they can get certification that they've been there in 1995, that would be another means of processing a 2017 application to bring forward. And a lot of them were, because the Land for the Landless these lands were issued out in the 90s. So the latest one that was issued was probably in 93, which is down in Arahan. So a lot of them may qualify in as far as occupants, occupiers, but then again, there's another, are they going to qualify as a Chamorro? So that's another thing. Either, I'm not going to know the numbers as to how, but if it does, if they don't qualify, there's no legislation to authorize them, to grandfather them in, then of course they need to vacate. And then, I guess, I don't know if the land trust would appraise the property and then sell it. I'm not sure how we're going to go about doing it, because there's going to be a dwelling on the house. A lot of the houses that we're talking about, majority of them are in Sagan-Lee Nazin. And in Sagan-Lee Nazin, they built them homes, the dollar homes. They're not, so there is a home there. It's a concrete home. So those are the ones that we may have to, kind of look at, because, do we appraise it? If they vacate, do we appraise it and then sell it? I'm not sure how we're going to go about doing that. But of course, we have to vacate, and then we put a qualified Chamorro.
reasonable efforts?
I think we have. I think we have.
For those that did come in, and then, agreed to go ahead and pay what was due, was the department very accommodating in payment arrangements, or did you have to put down the $5,000 right then and there, or was there payment arrangements that were made to accommodate?
Well, basically, we were guided by the public law. The public law did guide us as to how there was a time frame that we had to look at, and they had to pay it off. I think we did, because in the law it allowed them maybe 30 days, but we extended it all the way till December 31st. So I think we did. I think we did allow them ample time.
And maybe, do you have a rough estimate of what some of these lots cost? I've heard somebody say that some of these lots probably 30, 40 grand at least.
That's what it is, yes. About 35,000. I've heard people selling it for 35,000, 40,000.
Not a bad investment. Come in
Right.
and pay 5,000 for a property that's valued at 35, 40 grand. The problem that you raise about properties that have not been paid off, there's a structure on it, there's family living in it. Of course, that I think is going to be the more difficult problem, because I don't think it's good public policy to solve the problem and you create another problem that's just as bad. So that's going to take a little bit more homework. My last question I have is, I know that the director sent you down to ask to read in his testimony, but can you just kind of, for the record, what is your position at land management, and what is it that you do there, and how long have you been there?
I'm a land management administrator, and I've been there for 24 years. And I basically manage all public lands. So with the recent merge of Chamorro Land Trust and Guam Ancestral, I was tasked to oversee the two programs.
So you're not new to the land business.
No.
Just want to put that on the record. All right. Anybody? Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just follow up, and again, excuse my ignorance on this program, but it seems to me now that the chairman has asked a couple questions, that this lot is transferable, can be sold? I mean, once a recipient receives it and pays for it, it then becomes their private property. In other words, they have a warranty deed on this piece of property, which they can then sell and transfer it.
They have conditions in there. Once you acquire it, 10 years from the deed, you cannot transfer.
You can't transfer the
You
natural
can't transfer,
time.
sell, or convey it.
From the
That's right.
date of the full payment.
The deed is
But nothing stops them from selling future rights, correct?
it does.
Okay. No, I mean, it was just a point of interest, like
Trying to understand this program, but okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator. Okay. No further questions. That completes our public hearing on Bill 26-34. Thank you very much. We'll move on to Bill 49-34, and I'll ask Senator Morrison, the sponsor, to go ahead and introduce the bill, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bill 49 seeks to adjust the small purchase law and corresponding policies in the Guam Administrative Rules, increasing the purchasing threshold from $15,000 to $25,000. I understand that there have been efforts made, on a larger part, procurement reform, in an effort by other senators to increase the small purchases threshold to $30,000. I believe Bill 49 can help to address this aspect of our procurement system with a slightly lower threshold. For information purposes, the proposed 25,000 threshold is the same threshold for similarly situated jurisdictions such as the state of Hawaii and Sinai, and these communities have recognized the steady increases in price of goods. The second aspect of Bill 49 is the requirement for small purchases to be completed by an electronic procurement system. The measure doesn't spell out any details about the system, nor does it require a basic set of expectations, hence the bill mentions. And I encourage GSA to work closely with the Office of Technology to develop a fair, transparent, and efficient system that at the minimum can establish a database of registered businesses that are in good standing, standardizes requests for quotations, ensuring that all eligible vendors have an opportunity to respond, that GSA receives positive quotations in a timely manner, and that a notification to successful and unsuccessful bidders are issued, and an automatic rejection of quotations that are in excess of small purchase threshold. The electronic procurement system needs to assist GSA in its ongoing efforts to address concerns raised in the previous describing small purchase procurements as piecemeal, uncomplicated, and convenient, that it limits competition, stifles fairness, is inherently inefficient and costly, and does not require advertisement. Small purchase procurement remains in the books. So long as this is the case, I look forward to additional input from agencies in our ongoing efforts to improve the aspect of our government's procurement system. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Signing up to provide testimony is Attorney John Brown. Sir, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Sponsor Senator, other senators. This bill has two substantive parts. One is increasing the limit for small purchases, and the other has to do with an electronic system for somehow operating small purchases. I just finished Module 2 course at GCC. I think it's the fourth class I've done this, in Module 2, I should say, in the last year. And this question of the number always comes up, and the students invariably, they're all government workers, by the way, say the 15 is just too low. So obviously we need to increase it. Whether it's 25 or 30 or some other number is just a policy decision. It's arbitrary to me. But I agree with them that it is. In fact, the recent news the last couple of days is the federal government is looking at just saying, well, why don't we just go to all the online buyers our small purchases? If it's a commercial item and you can get it from Amazon, you know that's a good price, and you can look at another price from Office Depot or somebody else who has that online, why are we even bothering with having a system of our own when we can look at that? So the world is moving towards electronic purchasing, and I approve of the idea. This raises some questions. It says that small purchases shall be completed through the system maintained and operated by GSA. There are a number of agencies in Guam who have their own procurement authority, and that allows them to procure very small purchases in accordance with the regulations the law that we have and the regulations that implements the law. Does this take that authority away from them? Does this assign sole authority for all small purchases, it seems to GSA? Because it says small purchase, this is the law that's going to be applicable to all. Our 3125 says everything in this law applies to all agencies. So there's some ambiguity to me as to whether that's the intent. When I hear the discussions of it, I'm not so sure that that's the intent. But I don't see any other agencies here complaining about this having been being taken away from them. I just wonder if they're even aware that this is what is the possibility of this bill. So that presents a problem. I'm glad to see that tackled. I think I would prefer that it's only GSA. In fact, I'd prefer that it was a smaller agency than GSA, because this kind of a change is a teething process, and we will learn from that process. We don't want to learn to fail. We want to learn to get it right. so I would like to see something like this as a test case. But what that is, I don't know. And the other question I have here, the system that's going to be operated by them, they're given the authority to develop what? A whole new method of source selection? Or just the standard operating procedures for doing an electronic purchasing of goods and services through the existing small purchase mechanisms? You know, there's a couple of small purchase mechanisms. One of them is not at all consistent with this. It's the BPA, Blanket Procurement Authority. That's basically a charge account with existing businesses, and you set those BPAs up with a variety of systems. That's very close to the standard, the federal schedules method, where you have a number of people and you're required to rotate amongst those various vendors with their accounts, open accounts. It's an open account buying system. This wouldn't work for that because those aren't advertised anyway. You don't get quotes from those people anyway. You know who your vendors are, and you go to them and get what you want, as long as it's within the limit. That also speaks to the care that you need to have and how high a limit do you want, because there's no, the only policing of that system is an after-the-fact audit a year or two or 4 later. So, how much you allow, how much discretion you allow, depends to some extent on the training of the people to do it in a trustworthy and responsible manner. So there's some things in that. Is it going to be, it says that it implies that it is going to be subject to their own internal operating systems, and that's the power that they have now. The GSA and DPW have power to enact their own internal functions, their own standard operating procedures. This doesn't affect how the public interfaces with it. It affects how the government people interface with it. And that's fine. But if it's going to give them power to create a whole new method of source selection, I would be reticent to just open the book to that kind of a blank check. I know we have a problem with the authority for promulgating procurement regulations at the moment, and we have had for decades, and that needs to be addressed. But just throwing this in there, I don't think that's the appropriate way to make such a significant move. Matters of form, as I've mentioned informally to you, I just want to get this on the record. Sections 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 all are intended to amend regulations. That's not within the purview of the legislature. The regulations are the purview of the executive branch. You can, of course, enact that as law. But actually, it's not necessary because in Section 1, where you change the number, that will devolve on the regulations automatically. These regulations have to comply, have to reconcile with the law. The law doesn't reconcile to the regulations. So I'm not sure how necessary that is. But those are my basic comments.
Mr. Santos?
Hi, my name is Albert Santos. I'm from Gura. I'm the AE manager. Anyway, I'm here to testify in favor of the bill. But more specifically, when it comes to threshold, as the young man here was mentioning, Gura has its own procurement authority, and we do have our procedures in place. Actually, we get audited probably twice a year to include also our procurement procedures and what we do. And we have HUD coming out here often. And one of their biggest concern they have is that HUD's threshold, especially in small purchase for construction, has been increased up to $150,000, while Guam is still at a lower amount. So I'm here again to see if we can increase that threshold up to at least $100,000 for the small purchase for construction. And more specifically, in light of what's happening and several of my bids that I have, with the shortage, especially with skilled workers, I'm seeing my price escalate for example, we rewarded 2 contracts. One is for the upgrade of the Stumble Gym to be used as a Tier 2 shelter. That price came in 20% higher than my government estimate. And usually the government estimate is conservative. We add or pad. The other one, the most recent one, is the Central Police Precinct that we're going to build in Sinhanya. Now, my last precinct that I built in Agate cost me $1.8 million. This one is $3 million. Less the generator that I have in Agate, less the site development that I have that I did in Agate. So the Sinhanya site is a pretty relatively flat land. So yeah, $3 million, no generator, but certainly will provide the hookup. So we're seeing that cost go up. So I'm not too much worried about the bigger contracts, but I'm worried also about the smaller contracts. With the lack of skilled workers, our threshold right now for small contracts is not going to cut it. I'm just more recently, we had a bunch of small contracts. And even at that, the contractors couldn't meet the duration because they were losing their skilled workers to the bigger company, coming in and offering them double their wages. How we also get graded at HUD, and this is more specifically towards the public housing side. So we have 750 units that are about 40 years old, and they constantly need major upgrades. Our average cost there, about $25,000 to bring it, to change out the water line, to upgrade the electrical. 4 of our smaller contracts were delayed by 30 days, only because the poor contractor said, I just lost another skilled worker. And so now they're going to have to hire new, or better yet, unskilled workers, and they're going to have to spend that time working with them. So you know that the mentoring and all that mentoring and that time is going to go up in terms of its cost. So yeah, that's why I'm in favor. Again, I hear his issues, but we definitely need to address our threshold. I believe our thresholds are very low.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Santos and Mr. Brown. I want to thank you for taking the time to be here. I also want to thank Mr. Brown for enlightening me, visiting the office, and helping to educate me a lot more on the procurement process. But I know we're talking more specific, some of the challenges. I know GSA provided testimony here, and I was hoping maybe they would have been here because we have some questions that with regards to the proposed electronic system. And you're correct. They have that ability, or they state they're already doing that to some extent with the type of things they're putting out electronically, or with regards to purchases or small purchases. But there are some questions I wanted to clarify to see if they're going in a direction that I think we should be at, as regards to wide reach, or with vendors, and see we're really getting a good reach out there and participation. Also, how, with knowing the new Office of Technology, and based on some of the developments of the roadmap they have in regards to assisting other agencies, these are some of the things they have discussed in the roadmap, and how they're kind of in line to assist GSA advance their existing process. So I know they've stated to some extent what they're doing, but we just want to include this in the Bill 49 to also see if these items are already being addressed. If not, then we'll have to figure out how to mandate that we get them done sooner with the challenges that we're having in regards to small purchase. If we're going to increase it to 25 or within that amount. I know within the existing measure, I don't know, Mr. Chair, Mr. Santos came here and was proposing something different, but it's within the measure of the chair. See, with regards to construction, but that's something new to me, and she brought it to light as regards to the construction threshold there. provide information. What we've done is we went out and we've met with a lot of the line agencies, and of course DOA GSA is one of these agencies. We sat down and picked out what are the top 3 challenges or what are things we can start working on, and what other senators in the past have been trying to work with them with regards to a policy change that has not been done, or maybe it's already an existing proposal. So this was one of them with regards to GSA that we spoke 2 months ago to see where we can assist them, and certainly we'll take note of your testimony and see how we can address that. But Mr. Chair, I thank you for this opportunity. I know you've been working very hard on the larger scale, and supporting you with your efforts, but I think we could address this aspect here with regards to small purchases, and maybe even looking at the construction threshold. That's something that I hope we can address very soon.
Thank you. And if you take a look, actually in the 33rd, we were addressing Article 3. It was actually. And that was one of the issues we addressed, the small purchases, increasing it from 30,000 for supplies and services, and for construction up to from 50,000 up to 100,000. So yeah, don't feel sheepish about Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you for your testimony. I just had a couple questions. So Attorney Brown, what do you think about the amount, the 25,000? I think you said we should be very careful, but do you agree with 25,000?
I agree with 25,000. I really don't have a problem with 30,000. I just think that the more money you let people use at their discretion, the more accountability you need to build into the system. I mean, we could make it $1 million if there's an adequate amount of transparency and accountability, and there isn't in these small procedures because they're meant to be informal and quick. So it's a balancing process, and where you draw the line is an arbitrary number, I think. But I wouldn't go too high. We can change it next year. But it's hard to go back down, as we found out about these home stuff, just listening to that once you got rid of them, you're stuck with them. So it's harder to go down than up. And if you have any doubts about between 2 numbers, I would say choose the lower. But I don't have any problem myself with either one of those numbers. And as Senator Adler pointed out, the bill has been introduced to raise the construction number for small purchases to 100,000, and that's been twice passed and twice vetoed.
Yes, I would like to see that also, the raise in the construction.
The one other issue I failed to point out, we are also a performance-based organization. So as we get these funds, we got to be able to spend it within a certain time. Now, with a bigger contract, I have no issue. With the small contracts, I do, though, because again, when you consider the time to advertise, the time to analyze, and go to at GURA, we go to the board for approval of any contracts. We're in public housing, we get subsidy, and our subsidy again is contingent on how well you occupy all those units. So when a unit stays vacant for a certain amount of time, we lose that subsidy as well. So we get graded on our vacancy. So yeah, it adds time in there, and I just feel that, and again, based on HUD, the FAR, they're up to 150,000 for small contracts, and yet we're still at the 35,000. And again, they base that based on 14 U.S.C. Again, that's the uniform U.S. Code Title 41, where they every 5 years they go through and adjust that rate based on the consumer index, and that's how they come up with those. What are the acceptable thresholds for those type of contracts?
The raising this limit is allows them to procure using only getting quotes from 3 vendors, or as you described online, three vendors. But I guess that's the concern, is that now instead of having everybody compete who's in this field, we are only required to get 3 quotes.
Yeah.
So I'm sure the small businesses, this may have an impact on them. But what about
So I think you raise a good point. Now, just so that everybody understands, when we're talking about small purchases, I can basically pick up the phone, call 3 suppliers or vendors and say, I have these specs, will you bid on it? And then they submit their bids, and I give it to the guy with the lowest bid that's able to satisfy the specs. Is that a pretty much an accurate description of these small purchases?
That's a description I prefer not to use, Senator, because you just say you pick up any 3 quotes, because the whole procurement system requires that you operate it and according to the principle. And that's the first section, the first subsection of the code says you apply and you interpret the procurement law itself, the provisions in procurement law, to promote its principles. One of the main principles is to foster competition. So if you're picking up and calling 3 people that you know aren't going to give you a quote, so that you can then just say, well, we'll get somebody else, you are not fostering competition. Picking up the phone and calling any 3 bidders is not fostering competition if you have 20 bidders available. So the principle is you must foster competition. Now, getting 3 quotes for anything on this island is hard. And I know how difficult it can be. I'm on a lot of boards, and we need a lot of services, and that's just, it's pulling teeth. But if you really want to get quotes, pay your vendors timely and in full. We can change procurement law all day long, and it's not going to make it any better. You can pay people timely and in full, and procurement is going to improve its efficiency 200% right off the bat.
I agree.
The last question I have is, I just want, the other concern with raising the cap is that, as you pointed out, Mr. Brown, that sometimes we're not able to audit these until the end of the year, or, the once-a-year audit will tell us whether they're really abusing this system. For instance, breaking up the bids so that they fit into these amounts when they're really.
So you don't want to do it. Yeah.
And I know it's the perennial issue, but is there any way? I was thinking this is an electronic system that they're describing, although it's not really described, but that they would maybe put the results online so we could all view them immediately, and that was going to help us to just audit it ourselves and see if we wanted to continue with this system and make sure that amount was serving us in the way it was intended. But GSA did send in a letter that says that they say GSA is currently using an electronic system. So they don't describe it in detail. They say that, and I'm going to accept that that's enough for the small purchases under 15. So it should be adequate to handle the purchases under 25 if this bill's passed. And do either of you have an objection to GSA's last suggestion that if this is passed, that any bids exceeding 50 or between 15 and 25, I guess those that are currently pending, as shown by the submitted requisition of the agency or department requesting the supply, may be withdrawn from bid, and the GSA may acquire such items through the amended small purchase method. I think it's an interim, while there were some that have already been processed. It's bids under 25 that she can now use the small purchase method.
If you're talking about an RFQ, which is what I think we're talking about, the small purchases, the RFQ method, not the BPA method. And there aren't any offers in the BPA method, so there's nothing to rescind. You may want to then renegotiate your contract at the $25,000 level on your BPA contract. But when it comes to quotes, once you picked up the phone, to use the phrase, and got a quote, that's a firm quote. I mean, it
No,
doesn't
I
say
think-
in the
I
procurement
think
law anything about withdrawing a small purchase offer. The procurement law speaks very specifically about the ability and when you can withdraw a bid. After bid opening, which is when all these prices are revealed, which is what the whole purpose of the RFQ, the withdrawing thing I think is a little bit problematic, and I would rather just roll the process in. The point of these small purchases is that they're happening frequently and routinely, so it won't take long to roll that in. I don't know why you have to withdraw it. You know, it's saving pennies to cause confusion and protest. So let's not trying to do that.
Okay. Do you agree, Mr.?
Okay, I guess Greer doesn't, the RFQ are, again, they're all documented, they're sent out, and we ask all these vendors to submit their quotes in writing by a certain date and certain time. And so our procurement staff will tally it up, and again, based on, who is the lowest responsive bidder there, would have discussed again, do you fully understand the spec, what we're asking for, whatever the service are, and so on. Even up to $500 in printing, we still go out and everything has to be documented. How many, she pretty much sent it to almost every printing vendor in the island, goes to the full book and said, okay. And we keep, again, she keeps a record here of all the people we send the RFQ to. And yeah, so, and I hear his concern, and again, with Gura, though, I assure you, we take our procurement policy very seriously. In fact, we probably have, as of today, maybe about 20 of our staff have been trained, and they went to the procurement class at GCOG, I guess. Yeah, so GCC. Yeah, so, and yeah, I think they're now on module number 3, and so yeah, we take that seriously. But again, documentation and transparency very important, especially when it comes to these small purchases.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Paul Don.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Santos, one of the concerns that Attorney Brown raised was with the whole electronic provision. Small purchases shall be completed through an electronic procurement system operated and maintained by GSA. I guess the question to you is, does your agency or department have your own?
We have our website, and we do put our advertisement on the website, but the point of also stating who we award to a certain contract, I like that. I mean, that's something to start. We don't deal with GSA. We have our own procurement policy.
You have your own procurement policy.
Yes,
so if this comes into effect, then this would basically, in essence, take away that ability from you and put it in GSA.
Yeah.
Okay. No? Well, that was one of the concerns that Attorney Brown raised.
Sorry, Senator, when you read the statute, it says small purchases shall be completed through an electronic procurement system operated and maintained by the General Services Agency. That's a pretty broad statement.
Yeah,
Right.
so we got something like the e-procurement. We are going to get involved, yes.
I'm sorry?
We're going that way, too.
In terms of, I'm sorry.
Electronic.
Oh, electronic.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. The issue was whether you had your own procurement abilities now, because if this section is left in, it would give the small purchases administration over to GSA, and it would no longer be in your hands.
No, we don't want that.
Okay, and I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
that, because that was one of the issues that was brought up by Attorney Brown,
Okay.
and you really don't want to have to do that through GSA.
Again, like I said, we are performance-driven, and we got to meet certain timeline. And I do have some of the issue with GSA's timeline.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Attorney Brown, you kind of threw me for a loop there about, how I was describing the small purchase. And that's really how I always understood it. That if a purchase was below a certain amount, then that small purchase can be expedited by basically picking up the phone,
You're right as to where the facial reading out of the rest of the context of the procurement law, I think it's in the regulation. It says you get 3 quotes. That's the basic
minimum
requirement. But they also say that you have a minimum time of 15 days to post. These times are relative. The overriding principle in the law is in the very first section of the code, and it says you have to apply the law as written to promote the principles. One of the foundational principles in that same section is to foster competition. And if you know that there's competition out there and you're refusing to foster it because you're going to there's 10 people, only going to get 3, you may be complying with the letter of the regulation, but you're not complying with the spirit and mandate of the law. That's sorry, Professor
Okay,
Brown
well,
doing module 2 again.
I guess I'll discuss that with you offline. Because, I mean, you may have just put your finger on something else that we need to address. But right now, I guess with the bill, it's the issue of increasing the threshold for small purchases. I think we've agreed that we probably should take a look at including construction services also, and taking a look at its current threshold of $50,000 and increasing that. But like I said, last term we were actually looking at increasing it to $100,000. I'm a little concerned about, although GSA says that they are currently using a, what was it they said in their thing? They're currently using an automated they're currently using the electronic system, is currently using an electronic system. But that on the bill, the implementation, purchasing thresholds that have been amended pursuant to this act shall become effective immediately after said electronic system is developed. So on the 4th page, line 3 and 4. So for the agency that is not going to be able to put it together, or for that matter, the autonomous agencies or whoever, this kind of, however you're doing it now, until the new electronic system is put in place, then that's when the new threshold comes on. So we'll probably need to take a look at that.
Mr. Chair, the GSA also recommends to delete this last section and put instead the language that I read earlier about the interim between 15 and 25 for the interim period, while there are any pending bids. But I'm thinking, if you delete that last section and not put in, I'm not sure the implications of not putting in her recommended last sentence, but she had recommended to delete that sentence for sure.
Okay. Well, the sponsor of the bill, I'm sure, has been taking copious notes so that you can make amendments to your bill. And there being no other testimony on Bill 49-34, we'll consider the bill duly heard. Thank you very much for taking the time to show up. Thanks. Now for the last bill, Bill 75-34. What this bill does is it requires that what we have now is a situation where approvals were given for certain constructions to occur. Property was come in, it was rezoned, plans have been approved, and then nothing happens. And then 30 years later, the project surfaces again. A good example is that hotel down in Agate across from the marina. When it was approved, there was subdivisions that are around there was not existent then. The infrastructure capacity was just great. 25, 30 years later, they come back and they say, okay, we're ready to build, and the total personality and character of that area has changed. Another example of this is the one up at Windward Hills. I believe 30 years ago, approval was given for that project. And then 30 years later, they came back and they said, okay, we're ready. And again, the entire neighborhood is different. And so it's a done deal already. So basically what Bill 75-34 does is that it's going to require that when an approval is given to rezone or to undertake certain developments, that then the developer has so many years to get things started. And if they don't, then they basically go back to square one and start all over again when they're finally ready to do that. In addition to that, there are a number of projects out there that are in that category that were approved decades ago, and the bill addresses that by requiring that within the next, I believe, 3 years, they have to get something started. Otherwise, they go back to square one in the process again. So with us to provide testimony today is Mr. Marvin Aguilar from the Department of Land Management, and you are the Chief Planner?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, Mr. Aguilar, please.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Ada, for allowing us to present this testimony on behalf of the Department of Land Management. My director apologizes for not being here. Normally he does this for the department. He has since been sequestered before the court and is now a juror. So if I may, you do have a copy of our May 26, 2017 comments for the Bill 7534, which is an act to amend Section 61620 of Subarticle 2, Article 6, Chapter 61, Title 21, Guam Code annotated. And this is relative to the decisions of the Territorial, or now the Guam Land Use Commission. Minutes and half a day. Bill number 7534 intends to establish a timeline for project applications approved by the Guam or Territorial Land Use Commission to commence with a specific time period. Otherwise, the notice of action which approved the project shall be deemed null and void. Over the course of the last several years, projects approved decades ago were brought back to the forefront with the owners of the development announced plans to revive their projects. While the public has been reminded of these previously approved projects, there exist other approved large projects that are currently dormant. Time limitations on variances and conditional use permits may be imposed under two existing processes. Number one, the requirement of securing a building permit or a clearing grading permit for the subject project within 1 year from the date of a recorded notice of action as issued by the Guam Land Use Commission pursuant to Executive Order 96-026. Noncompliance of this requirement may result in avoidance of the approved variance or conditional use permit. And number two, as a condition of approval of a notice of action as imposed by the Commission. We are confident that by embedding a sunset clause into Section 61620, we will encourage long-term commitment by current and future development interests on Guam. Likewise, if approved, the proposal may deter speculative investment, that is, the purchasing of property and applying a land use plan, such as a conditional use, variance, or a change of zone for the purpose of securing a higher land value for resale. Such activity has since left a lasting challenge to efforts by the government of Guam to deliberate land use planning efforts for the island as a whole. With the inherent authority on planning and forecasting land matters, the Department of Land Management sees the value and importance of gauging land use development trends as a means to best evaluate applicability of land use regulations to community attributes and to plan for future regulatory considerations for the island as a whole. The Department of Land Management and the Guam Land Use Commission respect the rights of private property owners to utilize their properties as they wish in accordance with governing laws and directives. We also recognize that conditions of affected communities change over time, and approved projects from distant past may now encounter conditions that may not be suitable to the needs of the development or with the desire of the community. Bill 75-34 further proposes the sunset provision be applied to previously approved applications for 3 years from the enactment of the bill. This provision is tactful and allows ample time for those developers to reassess their plans. However, we do suggest additional language be added, mentioned to be approved by the Guam Land Use Commission prior to the end of the 3-year period from the recordation date of notice of action. The Department of Land Management supports Bill 75-34 with the suggested change. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aguilar. Senator Morrison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regards to some of these lands that were rezoned, particularly down in the southern Agate with the PUD, and that I believe was in the 90s. I think exchanged hands to new owners, the land, and some of these things have been public already, and of some of proposed large-scale plans. Now, given this bill, and knowing, I'm sure there was NOAs given to those developers or in the past. How would this impact that type of project or those PUDs particularly like in Agate?
Well, the one in Agate, well, that was a particular case because if I'm not mistaken, that project was approved even prior to 1992. So it was even approved prior to the executive order coming out. And if I may clarify, the executive order did come out because it really wanted to make an attempt to stifle speculative development here in Guam, which really threw, a really bad curveball, if I may, to the different communities. And so the value that this bill brings, or if passed into law, is that it makes developers, what it would do is it would separate those who speculate and those who are really dedicated or are intending to actually commit to developing on Guam and do good development on Guam. So that's what it would do. It would affect those who, for the lack of a better term, are fly-by-night, if I may. They come in and they look for a possible development opportunity, and if it doesn't fly the way they want, they take off and they go to another place. And for the most part, that was pretty rampant back in the late 90s, early 80s when we had the boom. So,
given that there has been no action taking place regards to that PUD or down in Agate, with this bill gets enacted, would you say, even with the existing process, that they will have to, given the major land patterns, the changes in the community, would they have to restart again and start this whole process? Because I just want to be clear on that, because I've been told different stories. I mean, it's already zoned, and it's kind of seems like for the people out there, even with the mayor, it seems like it's a done deal. But I just want to be clear for our public that, particularly those that feel very alarmed about the proposals down there, that if this goes through, would it seem that this will be clear that they'll have to start again and provide a whole, go through the process of receiving an NOA?
Yes, sir, it would. Clearly what we were trying to achieve and why we're in support of the bill is that it supports the direction of reassessing what you have out of the property and how any development scheme you want to propose, either applying the old one or a new one, how it affects the community at present. Clearly, the one in Agate was proposed at a time where, again, the subdivision wasn't there. There were several attributes that they wanted to bring into the community, such as water, power, and sewer, which was not available at the time. So it was, to some extent, I guess, depending on who you talk to, it was a welcome development plan. But then again, it didn't materialize. And since then, the water did come in, the power did come in, a very viable sewer system is in. You have homes developed around the area, and now the community scenario is totally different. So, of course, we would encourage any type of development, either from the past or presented today, would take a step back and reevaluate, reassess. And that's why we support the bill at this time.
I just want to thank you, Mr. Aguilar, for all your effort and all the work you've been doing for our government and for our people of Guam. And I'm glad that you, those that at least were listening down in the community, I think you made it very clear exactly what I've been thinking. And, coming from the department, that makes everything official, the position.
Thank you, sir.
So just very quickly, when we really take a look at the provisions, the bill does two things. One, it codifies the existing Executive Order 96 96-26. It codifies that.
Yes.
The second thing that it does is it reaches back to those projects that were approved prior to the promulgation of this executive order.
Mm-hmm.
And basically reaches back to those projects and says, get something started, otherwise you have to come in and we have to relook at your project here and not surprise the neighborhood like the way the one at Windward Hills did, or even the one in Agate. It's like, we're ready to build. Oh, yeah? So, okay. Vice Speaker.
Questions? Thank you, Mr. Aguilar. First of all, how did the department enforce this 1-year limit? Are they pretty strict about it? If it's beyond a year, it's over? I mean, it doesn't say whether it may result in voidance.
Say again, I'm sorry.
According to this, the executive order says that if you don't comply, then it may result in voidance. So I'm asking, does the commission often void it, or does it deem it automatically voided?
By nature of by nature of the executive order, the commission is normally hand-tied, from saying, well, it's not going against that executive order. So, insofar as we're keeping track of it, the Senator Morrison mentioned that Sadler have been sitting dormant for decades. And in fact, the Windward Hills, for information, was actually created back in 1963, if I may. So I wasn't even a thought back then, not to give you my age. But so these projects have sat for quite a long time. And let alone trying to find records from those days. When Windward Hills was approved, if I may, Senator, when Windward Hills was approved, the codification of the zoning law was only 8 years. It was only 8 years old, if I'm not mistaken, if not 2 years old, when the zoning law, the zoning laws came out that finally promulgated the zoning law. So a lot of these projects did come in prior to or in the inception of the zoning code, and luckily to an extent, kind of mirrored what the intent was when the zoning code was approved. How we, getting back to your question, how we track it, a lot of times what folks do is they come back and say, oh, we did our research, we realized that we had an approval back in 1993. So we go back into our files, which are in boxes, by the way, and we go through it and we pull them out and say, well, sure enough, you do have an approval. And that's where our research starts, and we look at the conditions of the commission that was imposed back then and see if they qualify to date, or if they qualify or they don't qualify. So in a nutshell, with Executive Order 9626, it allows us to put that land in the sand and say, you didn't do anything for 20 years. You know, you go back to square one. You have to reapply. And hopefully, again, what we want to see, what is most desirable, is a reassessment of a project that, again, will take the community, the attributes of the community into consideration, or at least that information is brought up before the commission when the project is brought to light before them.
Thank you, Mr. Aguilar. Yes, I agree, and I agree with you on that. And this bill, I think, makes it very clear that it's like automatic. It shall be deemed null and void. There's no further action required by the commission. They don't need to vote. It doesn't look like to me. It's automatic, and I like that about the bill. What do you think about the change from 1 year to 3 years? Because in the executive order, it says if you don't get your building permit within 1 year, but this bill would extend that to 3 years and allow for extension up to 5 years.
Right.
Do you have an opinion?
Well, I think my opinion on that is that there is the economic side to that. One of the things that we mentioned in our testimony is that we're very cognizant of private property rights, and how they go about wanting to do, what they want to do on their property in accordance with the zoning law. When they're about ready to take that next step to do full development, today with medium and large projects, of course, one component is financing, and we're very cognizant of that. And we've always encouraged potential developers to please come in and see us to discuss their project, merely for the purpose of looking at timelines before they can start doing project development schemes, planning, working with the different agencies on infrastructure and so forth. And so the 3 years gives them that opportunity, at least in our mind, gives us kind of, that's I'm not an economist and I'm not a development forecaster, but I've seen enough where 3 years seems to be the median in trying to plan a project out. And really, if you can't do it within 3 years, let alone 1 year, to secure a simple creating permit under the current executive order, then something must be amiss.
Okay, and then I think this is my final question. Do the building permits expire?
My understanding is that building permits, when issued, expire within a year.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
they're given 1 year.
Okay, so that would be also consistent with this. So we only give them 1 year to use their building permit, and this would give them 3 years to use their conditional use.
Well, it would be an additional step.
Right.
So you go back and you reapply for a permit, get it for 1 year. You don't do it, you go back again and you reapply. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I would like to commend you. This is a good bill. I think it does protect our communities, and because they've already been utilizing a system pursuant to the executive order, hopefully this implementing it would not be a problem. In fact, you're being more generous than the executive order and giving them more time to comply, and I appreciate this bill. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, and I think after 21 years, I'm sure there's probably a lot more regulations and hoops to jump through than there was back in 1996. So certainly the 3-year, extending it out to 3 years to get something off the ground, I think is reasonable. I don't have any particular questions, but I do appreciate the input from land management. I must state, for the record, that we have not received any testimony from the Guam Association of Realtors. And so, I would expect that would be the group that will be coming in and providing input on this and nothing. So probably we'll just, the books are still open and they'll still have time to provide testimony. But otherwise, thank you very much, and please convey appreciation to the director for the testimonies that he has given today. And with that, then, we'll